The information contained in this podcast is an expression of opinion and does not constitute investment advice. This is the Gold Money Podcast with Felix Moreno, keeping you up to date with expert opinion on precious metals and the markets.
Hello and welcome to the Gold Money Podcast. I'm Felix Moreno and I'm here today with Erik Voorhees, who's speaking with us from Panama City. He's the CEO of Coinaport and one of the Bitcoin early adopters and entrepreneur. Hello, Erik.
Hello, how are you?
Great. So, Erik, let's jump straight into it. You gave a wonderful speech at the Bitcoin conference on the nature of money. Why is money useful in society? What should it actually do?
Yeah, I thought that was an important topic at the conference because a lot of people tend to focus on the technical aspects of Bitcoin, whether it's the network itself or how it maintains security or all the various nerdy computer stuff that goes into it. But really, I think the Bitcoin experiment is far more about money itself instead of technology. So I wanted to give a talk about why Bitcoin was such a good money and how it fulfilled that role. And so my whole talk was really just about how money comes into being, why it's used, how it relates to barter, and the properties of Bitcoin, which make it excellent for exchange with other people.
But you also talked about gold and silver and why it's historically being chosen as money by the free market so often. And it's not by chance, but because of the properties that precious metals have inherently.
Right. And, I've long been an advocate of gold and silver as money. I think Rothbard's book, What Has Government Done to Our Money, is probably the thing that really kicked me over the edge and very clearly and succinctly showed me what the real essence of money is. So I'd always been a big fan of gold and silver. And when I had originally discovered Bitcoin, I was incredibly skeptical of it. Figured it was just some stupid little online currency scam. And after reading about it, I came to see that the attributes of Bitcoin as money were very, very similar to gold and silver. And so that got me interested in learning more about it. And it was because I understood why gold and silver make great money that I was open to understanding Bitcoin in a similar way.
In fact, one of the attributes of Bitcoin that you mention and you joke about is the hard limit on how many Bitcoins there can be, how many units there can be of Bitcoin. Is scarcity fundamental to one of the fundamental reasons why gold and silver are good money?
Yeah. And there's a number of properties, and that are needed for a good money. Scarcity is obviously one of them. Gold and silver, much of their strength comes from the fact that they are scarce and they cannot be created by any party or debased by any party. So, if Bitcoin did not have that same attribute, if it could just be created by a company or any group that wished to create it, then I wouldn't have been interested at all. It never would have taken off. It never would have been interesting to the people that understand it from a monetary perspective. And ultimately, it wouldn't work as a means of exchange. So that was absolutely crucial. And this is something that is fundamentally different from any other virtual currency that has existed, is this ability to have a scarce supply. And it's really quite a marvelous technological invention to have a digital asset that is scarce. I don't think that had ever been created before.
In fact, the main problem with anything digital is just so easy to copy or to make more of, right? Just add ones and zeros.
Yeah, and well, in most realms of life, the fact that you can copy anything digital is what makes digital things so useful and valuable. But when it comes to money, that presents a problem because you can't just create a digital money that can be copied and reproduced by anyone else. So,
you can. It's called the US dollar, right?
Correct. You can't make a good one. I will say that. So really, it required someone to figure out a way to make a scarce digital product before you could have what I would consider a legitimate digital currency.
But let's talk about this thing that both precious metals and Bitcoin have in common. They're decentralized. Why is that better than having a central authority, a central planner, or a central bank determining what the rules should be?
Right. So even if you have a central entity in charge of a money, even if they're benevolent, you can't assume that they will be able to know how a money should be managed. Economies are incredibly complex, and no central person or group, no matter how smart they are, can ever figure out how to tinker with the system in such a way as to maximize its efficiency. People try, and of course the Federal Reserve would claim that it's able to do just that. But I'm skeptical of that position, and I don't think anyone is able to actually manage an economy or any aspect of it. So this is central to money, because money is at half of every transaction. If an entity is able to manage and manipulate money, then they are essentially centrally planning the economy, and that just doesn't fly with me. So Bitcoin, most people don't understand this. I think when they first learn about Bitcoin, they don't realize that there's no company behind it. There's no one in charge of it, but really that's central to it. And
that's one of its main strengths, right?
Right. And it comes down to an issue of trust. Any company that created a digital currency, even if they promised not to artificially inflate it or to set rules on how it would be used, you have to trust that their word is good. And even if it's good for a while, you can't trust that it will be good forever, or you can't trust that it will be good when governmental pressure or regulatory pressure is placed on them. So ultimately, you can't really trust it at all. So you need a system that doesn't require trust, and that can only be done when there's no central party to trust.
Exactly. That was the entire idea behind Nakamoto's paper, right? The need for a currency that doesn't require trust.
Exactly. And, even what is so amazing about Bitcoin is that it is really the first time that people have been able to transfer value across a distance without trusting anyone. Gold and silver allow you to store value without trusting anyone. You can hold the gold, and you don't have to trust any other party to deliver it to you once you have it. But you can't, in any great degree, send gold or silver to other people at any distance without trusting another party. It's certainly not in any quantity needed for real business, right? So you can give a gold coin to your friend, but you can't transfer $500,000 of gold to someone across the world without the trust of another party. It doesn't work. So Bitcoin finally allows people to not only hold value without trust, but to transfer value without trust. And that's why it's so exciting.
But when they're transferring value, what they're really doing is transmitting information, right? It's just a matter of a code, a number, the private keys and the public keys.
Yeah, well, what you're doing when you send a Bitcoin to someone is you're telling everyone on the Bitcoin network that you're debiting a credit from your account and you're sending that credit to someone else's account. So everyone in the world that's using Bitcoin sees that transaction is happening. And due to the magic of cryptography, which is somewhat above my head from a mathematical point of view, but I understand conceptually how it works, because the system is based on cryptography, you don't need to trust any other party to satisfy their end of the deal. And as soon as you broadcast your transaction, the other party who is supposed to receive it receives it, and then it's done. You don't need to get approval from anyone. You don't need to wait for anyone to validate that you were able to send the money. So it works very smoothly.
Well, of course, you have to wait for confirmation by the blockchain, right, and by the miners. But let's not get too technical.
Sure.
And also, that's pretty fast and almost foolproof. But what I wanted to get to is that if all you have to do is tell the rest of the Bitcoin network that you're transferring value, and it's just information, the only way to block that transfer would be to censor the internet, right? To stop free speech online.
Correct, because you're not just telling one person. If you were just telling the central clearinghouse of Bitcoin that you're transferring the money, then all the government would need to do was block your connection to that central house. But because it's a distributed peer-to-peer network, as long as you can broadcast the message to anyone else anywhere that's on the internet that has the system, they will then in turn broadcast it, and so on. So it's a web, and it becomes extremely difficult to prevent messages from being transferred over that web.
You basically have to live in a country with no access to the internet, like North Korea or Cuba.
Correct. And of course, even in those countries, people are, it doesn't take too much intelligence to figure out how to get around those types of blocks, whether it's having your own satellite dish or using
or just
VPNs
a balloon. Or just a balloon. You've seen the Loon project by Google, right?
I've started to hear about this. Yeah, I think I need to look into it further, but it sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's my plan to liberate North Korea. Just send propaganda over and bitcoins for people to buy books.
Yeah, exactly. So as long as you have as long as you can get a connection to the internet, which is essentially a utility today, just like air and water and electricity. As long as you can get that, then Bitcoin works. And I think a lot of the gold and precious metals people are extremely skeptical of Bitcoin because they say, well, what if the internet goes down, the money will become worthless? And it's true that if the internet went down, the Bitcoin system would stop working. It would essentially freeze in place until the internet was restored. But really, it is not valuable as an end of the world type currency. It is valuable as a world that we currently live in currency.
I'm sorry, Eric. I thought you could, the blockchain would still exist, right? And you can make hard copies of the blockchain, and you can still transfer value without moving things from the blockchain. Just use a paper wallet, right?
Sure. If the internet went down, essentially the system would freeze, though. So the blockchain would still exist because it's stored on hard drives, millions of copies of the hard drive of the blockchain all over the world. But if the internet was down, messages of transactions wouldn't be able to move between people, so things would just be stuck. It's not like your balance would be wiped out. You just wouldn't be able to send bitcoins to anyone or really receive them if they can't send it. So the system would just freeze until the internet was restored. But really, the internet goes down, we have bigger troubles. Bitcoin is not trying to be a monetary system of a caveman society.
Oh yeah, but I like the idea of the plans, the whole idea of making it nuke resistant or apocalypse resistant. It's a fun intellectual exercise.
Yeah, and indeed, it would survive a shutdown of the internet. It would be stuck until mankind figured out how to get the internet back, and then it would have its bitcoins back and running, and all the people who had bitcoins before would have the same bitcoins as they did prior.
Okay, so how is monetary competition in general, actually being able to choose your own money, going to help people in countries where they have trouble with money? How is it going to help people in Argentina and Venezuela and North Korea?
Well, first of all, money provides a few services. One is store value. And so even if someone's not using Bitcoin to transact, to do business and trade with other people, they need to be saving money. If they're smart, they save some money and they're not spending everything that they earn. So what means do they have to save it? In their normal currency, it's going to be wiped out 20 or 30 or 50% a year by inflation. So what do? Well, if they just acquire some Bitcoins instead of acquiring the failing currency, then already Bitcoin is saving them, and having that option is a huge blessing to those people. But beyond just storing value, the ability to trade in Bitcoin can allow people to get around capital controls. It can allow people to avoid the crazy taxes that are placed. Like in Argentina, there's like a 50% tax on anything purchased from abroad. How amazing is that? You buy $1,000 television and it's $1,500 purely because the government wants $500 of that purchase. So, using Bitcoin, you can obviously go around all those channels, and really you don't have to care about government policy anymore because you're not really susceptible to it.
Well, of course, you can still be persecuted, right?
Sure. And, Bitcoin has not been made illegal anywhere. I suppose someday it could be made illegal somewhere. We'll see which tyrannical regime wants to prove it's the most tyrannical by outlawing it first. Maybe it'll be the US, maybe it'll be China. We'll see. But until then, holding and using Bitcoin is not illegal at all. And even in the case where it becomes illegal, most of the people that are in these societies where their currencies are falling apart, they don't care that the law says they can't do something. If they're trying to protect themselves and their families, they're going to do what needs to be done. So if they take certain precautions and they're careful, then they can use Bitcoin safely and not be on the radar.
Right. So let's talk a bit about a concern that's very much in focus in the first world: privacy. how does Bitcoin help people in, I don't know, in countries where privacy is under attack?
Right. So most people, I think, are very alien to the concept that you can actually have financial privacy. We have our bank accounts, and those are attached to our names. And whether we're withdrawing money from our ATM or we're using our debit card or we're using a check, in all cases, the payment is attached to our name. In the U.S., often to our social security number, our address, phone number. All these identifying informations are attached to every transaction that you make. Mm-hmm. And Bitcoin completely breaks that. So when you send a Bitcoin transaction, no personal information goes along with it. It's simply one account number sending a certain number of Bitcoins to another account number. And as long as you haven't posted your account number on your Facebook profile, it is, private. No one knows that that's your account number, and you can have as many as you want. You can make thousands of accounts in a second and use any of them for any purpose whatsoever. So it gives people, actual financial privacy. They don't have to,
if they want it, because of course you can always make a vanity account, right, with a number that has your nick or your name on it.
Sure, and even beyond that, most people don't care that much about privacy, and there can be online wallets for Bitcoin where people store their Bitcoins that fully comply with, let's know your customer and anti-money laundering laws. And so such a wallet could require you to identify yourself and provide, information before they hold Bitcoins for you. And Bitcoin doesn't preclude that. It allows a company to ask for your information if you want to use their service, but using just Bitcoin itself doesn't have any identifying information attached to it. So, if Bitcoin is used widely, I imagine most people won't use it in a private manner. But the point is that it has the ability to be private if you care about privacy.
So basically, like a gold coin, you can have it registered and set up somewhere for show, or you can have it in a box hidden under a tree in a garden, right?
Yeah, well, or let's say with gold, people often want gold as a private store of wealth, but unless you're storing a huge amount in your house, which is incredibly dangerous itself, you have to store it with some safe institution somewhere. Often that has to be registered in your name. Mm-hmm. And Bitcoin allows you to store any amount of wealth without your name being attached to it whatsoever.
In fact, one of the things I've seen is that there's several businesses selling gold for Bitcoins.
Yeah. Their business has been very good.
Yeah, they're two very complementary things because they're both voluntary, free market, decentralized. They both allow you to protect your privacy and your property without having to ask anyone for permission. And they're both devoid of counterparty risk, which doesn't mean it's devoid of all kinds of risk. Obviously, Bitcoin has been very volatile recently. Gold has corrected somewhat in the past few months.
Right. This is important to see how they are really beautiful complements to each other. So metals have been around for thousands of years. People trust them implicitly. If anything is the ultimate store of value, it's gold in our society. Bitcoin doesn't change that, and certainly Bitcoin is far more volatile than gold. So if your goal is to preserve wealth, gold is probably the right answer for you. But Bitcoin provides certain advantages in certain areas that gold and silver cannot match. So understanding the strengths of both and utilizing both to achieve financial independence is really the key.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a bit about the recent evolution of the Bitcoin network, because I look a lot at the numbers and see how the number of users is growing, how the number of companies that work with Bitcoin is growing. But tell me what you see recently and what's up for the immediate future.
Yeah, so Bitcoin is sort of just kind of grows and grows each year on a fairly steady path. And during this path, you have big periods of price volatility where the price will skyrocket and then crash when there's a big press storm about things. Mm-hmm. And so it can be hard to separate the day-to-day price movement from the actual usage. But there are a number of ways you can see actual usage. You can figure out the businesses that are accepting Bitcoin. You can see how many software downloads of the client are happening and how many transactions are happening on the network. And you can get a pretty good picture to know if the system is growing or shrinking. And typically the system seems to be growing at a steady rate, not an exponential rate, just a steady increase over time. And it really doesn't seem to care much about these big price movements. After the first big bubble in 2011, a lot of people got really scared and they thought that the system was doomed and the bubble had popped forever and it was just going to fall to zero. And of course, that was wrong. The system continued to build, and people all over the world continued building infrastructure, even though there were so many naysayers. And now that infrastructure exists and the system is stronger. And we had another recent bubble this April, and the same kind of thing happened. People who are skittish about it and don't understand the long-term implications, they bail out and the price falls. But those who understand the system keep building, and ultimately the price will recover.
And it's far more important, in my opinion, that the number of users. You keep on seeing people adding more wallets, more services, more businesses. It's ever easier to actually buy bitcoins, for instance, at least in the United States.
Yeah, and I think the reason that it hasn't grown exponentially is because the price has grown exponentially, but the usage I don't believe has. And I think it's because in general it's still difficult to obtain bitcoins. It's not very convenient. It's far more convenient than it used to be, but it's still not that convenient. Explaining it to my grandmother would not be that easy.
But you're incredibly humble. You've had a big part yourself in making it much easier, much more accessible to many more people to actually go up to a store and buy bitcoins with cash, right?
Yeah. So, I was working with BitInstant last year up until February of this year, and BitInstant has done a great job helping people, at least in the U.S., get Bitcoin very quickly and relatively easily. So that's been a very important piece of infrastructure. But still, that's mostly U.S. focused, and people really would like to be able to buy coins sitting in their room and not have to take cash out to a 7-Eleven somewhere. So the infrastructure needs to keep getting better. And new entrepreneurs around the world are figuring out ways to essentially help onboard people into Bitcoin. Because once you get into the Bitcoin world, it's like a beautiful meadow. Everything is easy. It's easy to move money around. It just works well. But it's the points where the traditional banking systems and Bitcoin interact that cause all the stress and trouble. So moving people between the old legacy bank system and the Bitcoin world is where most of the entrepreneurial action is happening, and that's where.
So basically, the border guards are very annoying, but once you get into the safe haven, everything's really easy and simple.
Yeah. Imagine if you're on the Titanic and it's in the middle of sinking and everyone's running around crazy, and there's a lifeboat, but difficult to get into the lifeboat, and everyone's trying to push, and no one's quite sure what's going on, and it's very hectic. Once you're on the lifeboat, you're fine, but trying to get onto the lifeboat is not easy. And meanwhile, the Titanic sinks, and all the monetary systems of the world are kicking and screaming and falling apart.
So have we hit the iceberg already, or are we just close to it?
Oh, I think fiat currencies have hit the iceberg long ago. I mean, they're sinking. You can measure them sinking because they're just continually losing value, and that's not a process that's going to stop. They're just going to keep losing value. So anyone that's trying to hold value in those currencies is going to be in further and further trouble. Sure,
but people, there's the whole boiled frog thing. People get used to losing value at a steady and slow rate. It's the sharp movements that we're all, wondering if they're going to happen or not.
And that's a very funny point. A lot of people criticize Bitcoin for its price volatility, and they don't want to hold any money in it because it's so volatile. And it's sad because they would rather hold a stable asset that is continually declining in value. Like the dollar is relatively stable, but you can count on it to be always declining in value, even though it's stable. And people prefer that in some cases than to take a chance with something that is appreciating wildly, but doing so in a volatile manner. So, I think a lot of people stick with what they're comfortable with, and that means they're going to go down with the Titanic. And I'm not sure what to do other than just to keep building this alternative system.
Yeah, building alternatives is the only thing that you can do to help people voluntarily, at least, without doing it so that they have an option when they need it, when they realize that they need it.
Exactly.
Okay, so Erik, it was absolutely excellent talking to you. Is there any website or any particular thing you would like to promote, talk about?
No, I don't think so. If you're in the US, I recommend bitinstant.com for purchasing Bitcoin. But in general, I encourage people to simply learn about it. Don't take my word for any of this. Learn about the system. Take a few hours in your afternoon and learn about what is going to be the future of money. And I think as you learn about it, you'll discover something quite exciting, and you'll be very glad that you did.
Right. So thank you very much for being in the Gold Money podcast. We hope to have you back again, Erik.
Thank you very much.
Subscribe to the Gold Money newsletter at www.goldmoney.com to receive email updates on new articles, videos, and iTunes podcasts from our Gold Research section.